This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 63rd edition of Sports and Stuff on RainierAvenueRadio.world. My special guest today is Washington State House of Representative member Eric Pettigrew. Mr. Pettigrew represents the 37th District in the Washington State House of Representatives. Today, as my engineer today, I have Chad Anderson. Chad is the host of two shows at RainierAvenueRadio.world, including the Northwest Rap Show. We appreciate Chad's work. He's been our station now for a while. There's a lot of good things going on at RainierAvenueRadio.world. I want to mention a couple things before I get back to Representative Pettigrew. Our sports department has shows hosted by yours truly, Rick Dupree. Granville Emerson, Renaud Laurent host a fun show. Lidline Sports, Masvita Marari hosts a great show. Seattle Sports Weekly. Pat McCarthy and Masvita hosts a show on the Seattle Metro Sports Conference. Mark Bryant has a fitness-based show. Juan Cotto has a show. We have some great news shows here, talk shows, music shows, a lot of good stuff's going on at our Seattle-based station. My show, Sports and Stuff, has been around now for over 2 years, having a lot of fun. I practice law, and I do this show on the side. My interviews are on my website, law firm website, and Mixcloud. A bunch are on RainierAvenueRadio.world. When we get back to you now, Eric, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Pettigrew is a member of the Washington State Legislature. He is currently the Democratic Caucus Chair. Eric represents the 37th District, which is one of the more diverse districts in the state of Washington. And I just learned a few minutes ago that our studio in Columbia City is in Mr. Pettigrew's legislative district. Kind of neat. Mr. Pettigrew was elected as a state rep back in 2002, a Los Angeles, California native. Eric played football at Oregon State University. He later received a master's degree in social work from the UW. Kind of cool. You have a little Husky blood, Eric. Had to throw that in. Representative Pettigrew has worked in government, the private sector, the nonprofit sector. He's done a little bit of everything. Eric recently accepted a position with the Seattle NHL Group as a director of suite services and as a community ambassador. He's been involved in just countless community organizations. Eric's married with 3 children. I believe you're also now a grandfather, right?
I am a grandfather, very proudly a grandfather to Bailey Blake.
I like it. Well, Eric, today we're going to learn a little more about your career, get your thoughts on a host of issues, including some sports issues. And thank you so much for coming on Sports and Stuff on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Very happy to be here, Paul.
Always a pleasure to see you, Eric, and thank you for doing this. Eric, you've worked in politics for a while now. Why don't you tell us how you got the bug to go into politics? And were you interested in politics as a young kid growing up in Los Angeles?
You know, it's funny. I think I probably was interested in politics. I know that's what it was called at the time. I grew up in South Central LA in 1964, which is the time when the Watts riots happened. I happened to be 4 years old then. 1965 was the riots. And I saw my community basically go up in flames and turn a corner that wasn't very positive for the next number of years. It's taken a number of years to get back to being a productive community, but it's happened. But when I was a kid, watching the buildings burn and watching how things changed in my neighborhood really motivated me to want to do something to make change. And I didn't understand what that was. That's probably why I got into social work and sociology. And I really didn't have an opportunity to really dip my toe in the water until a number of years ago when Norm Rice asked me to be his deputy chief of staff for public safety. And I worked with him for a couple of years, overseeing the police and the fire department and gang intervention and judicial selections. And I got a chance to see politics firsthand. From there, I really kind of got out of politics after a couple of years and just started raising family and working. And it wasn't until Kip Takuda, who was in the seat before me, came to me and told me he was going to be retiring from the position of state representative and said that I'd be a great candidate to run for office. And when he came to me, honestly, I told him, I said, hey, I've had a little taste. I've seen politics up close, and I'm not really that interested in it. And he just kind of did in his Kip way, which kind of looked me dead in my eye in a real intense way and say, this community's given you a lot, and it's time for you to give back to your community. And as a result, I took his challenge and ran and won.
Well, it's a really compelling life story you shared there with us, Eric. I mean, as a young kid growing up with the Watts riots going on, I mean, you certainly, definitely a life story there. Eric, there's a lot of issues going on in the Washington State Legislature, and just give us maybe a quick summary. Can you share with us some issues little sneak preview of the 2020 session that we're going to see? Can you mention a couple hot issues going on?
I'm sure you're aware of the whole discussion around the $30 car tabs, and with the passage of that, although there is an appeal in the court system right now, or we're going to the court to address that, it could potentially have a huge impact on a number of transportation projects, short and long term, that ultimately will either slow down the progress on transit and transportation in our area, or completely stop it. So we're hoping that's one of the issues that we'll be dealing with down here in Olympia this next year. Is probably the biggest issue that we'll be addressing going forward.
I sort of... Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is typically what we call a supplemental year. As you know, we have a budget year which lasts for 105 days and a supplemental year which lasts for 60 days. And we go back and forth, vacillate, depending on what year it is. So this year is going to be a 60-day session. Last year was a 105-day session. Next year will be a 105-day session. And so the 60-day session is meant to be like an adjustment year to adjust the budget. We predicted certain things to happen and they didn't, or they happened too much, and so we got to make an adjustment to our budget. But this year we're really going to be digging deep into some policy issues, especially around transportation. There's a number of issues, of course, to do with constantly dealing with child welfare issues and mental health issues going forward this next year.
A lot to pack in there in a 60-day session, huh?
Oh, it's amazing. I've been in the legislature for 18 years, and even when we do have a lot to pack in, we do a pretty good job, although we've had a number of special sessions that have pushed us out to June. And hopefully that's not the case this year, because we're going into an election year, and most people are going to be motivated to get out and start connecting with their constituents so they can start campaigning.
Well, a lot of stuff ahead there in the legislative session. This is Paul Schneiderman, host of Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio.world with Representative Eric Pettigrew of the Washington State House of Representatives. Eric, you mentioned you've been in the legislature now for about 18 years or so. Can you mention like one or two really tough or challenging votes you've cast? Are there one or two that have just stood out that were really close calls for you?
Oh, man, I wish there was just one or two. There's been a number of them, and probably one of the most significant one that I was emotionally tied to very early on was related to allowing folks who had a drug felony to, after they had served their time, be able to accept food stamps. And the federal regulation had a restriction on that, but would allow states to lift that restriction if they got the votes to pass. And so my very first year was trying to get that restriction lifted in Washington State. And that was a very tight vote. The Speaker of the House actually would not let me bring the bill up until I actually went into his office and threw a complete hissy fit and did some legwork as far as getting other Republicans to either stand down or vote for the bill. And as a result, we got it. So that was probably my biggest one. My probably more recent one that's been really tough has been around charter schools. In Seattle, when we look at the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, however you look at it, there's been a gap for kids of color, especially in our district.
Right.
And they've been really struggling with the current just public school system that we've had. And it's been that way ever since I moved to Seattle, which is back in 1985. And over the years, I had seen very much progress in reducing those numbers and reducing the dropouts and increasing the success of African American students and students in the Asian Pacific Island community and Hispanic students, and so I thought that, hey, at the very least, let's make a run at doing something different. Not to say that we want to completely turn over the existing system, but to provide some other alternative that could potentially help a lot of those students to be successful in the public school system. Well, and that was a very difficult vote because typically Democrats don't support charter schools, or historically they haven't supported charter schools. And,
right.
And the teachers union has been very adamant against it, especially in Washington State. But I felt compelled to try to do something different than continue to doing the same thing we had been doing over and over again and expecting the same, a different result, which is the definition of complete insanity.
Well, those are two interesting examples you gave, Eric, of some challenging decisions and efforts you've made in the state legislature.
What were some more? I'm sorry.
Well, no, those are the two you gave are really good. Let me move on to a couple more subjects. I'd love maybe we can get back and talk more about some of the work you've done in the legislature. I anticipate we will. Eric, you played football at Oregon State University. Why don't you share with us how you ended up at OSU as a kid from Los Angeles, and share with us a couple highlights of your Oregon State University football career?
Oh man, I am so proud of my Oregon State career. Although we only won 4 games in 4 years, I would do it all over again. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship at Oregon State in 1978, and I had the opportunity to go to some other universities, but it seemed like Oregon State at the time was just positioned to actually accelerate. It didn't happen that way, but I got an incredible education and got a lifetime of friends that I still stay in touch with now. Probably some of the biggest highlights I had is, of course, watching Marcus Allen run up and down the field and John Elway throw the football and run around, as well as a number of other Hall of Famers that I got to field with at the time, and to watch them up close and personal and actually get to see them as folks. I can remember one time, Ronnie Lott. Well, actually, I can remember playing against Kenny Easley. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that I chased Kenny Easley. My quarterback threw an interception, and I chased Kenny Easley. I didn't catch him, but I chased him. I figured I would give people some entertainment and show my speed, and so I probably got within 20 yards of him. I just stayed in the film until he scored his touchdown, so that was one of my big highlights. And another big highlight was one time I was playing against Ronnie Lott, and I was an offensive lineman, and he was, of course, a defensive guy, and he was standing around the pile of the tackle, and no one had blown the whistle yet, and so as a result, I blocked him right before the whistle happened, and he didn't take too kindly to that, and he called me a few names. But I purposely try to avoid him even today because I don't want to have to walk up to him and go, "Hey, do you remember that time?" But then I got to play against Mano Tuiasosopo, who's an outstanding football player, and Kenneth Sims and Ben Rudolph. I mean, these guys are just incredible athletes at the time. So I had a great career. I'm still loyal to Oregon State despite the fact that they've had a really tough time winning over the years, although tomorrow's a very big game for us because we play Washington State, and that would make us both eligible if we're able to win that game. But I have a complete loyalty to Oregon State. I do have a little bit of Husky in me, so push comes to shove, I'll always support the Huskies after the Beavers, but never the Ducks.
Great stories. And playing against Marcus Allen, Ronnie Lott, John Elway. I mean, just some major football legends. Paul Schneiderman again on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio with Representative Eric Pettigrew. Just great stories. I'll have you back one day, Eric. I'd just love to chat with you more about some of your football stories. So speaking of your football days, Eric, Oregon State, how has football helped in any ways in your political career and your career in nonprofits in the private sector?
It really is. Like I said, I played playing college football is not to prepare for it, to play it. It is physically and mentally very difficult. And with anything, as in anything, it's so much easier when things get tough to actually quit, to say, I'm done, I'm not going to give my best effort, I'll walk away, I'll walk off the field. As a matter of fact, I had a lot of opportunities to do that. One of my coach got fired, and I was put in a position where I was on the scout team. I wasn't a starter anymore. I went from starter to scout team there for a while. And one of the things I learned from football is really just stay in the game, Stay playing, give extra effort, just keep working hard. That's one of the things that I knew that I could control, is that if I just worked hard and tried to get better and just gave just 100% effort, that the odds of something changing would happen, and that's exactly what happened. I ended up being a starter for the remainder of my football career. I got an incredible education at Oregon State, and I take that same mentality in everything I do as it relates to my professional life, is just even when things aren't going well or things seem bleak, to just work a little harder, stay a little focused, stay open, look for opportunities to get better, and just do the best you can.
Well, football and life have something in common. Sometimes you take a few hits, you got to try to get back up. That's an analogy I've heard over the years. Well, speaking of your college football career, Eric, I think you have some very special insights on this. A member of the Washington State Legislature, one of your colleagues, Republican State Rep Drew Stokesbury, has sponsored a bill allowing college athletes in Washington State to be compensated for up to fair market value of services and retain an agent. Where are you at on your colleague's bill?
Oh, man. I love that, as long as it can be administered equitably across the different universities and the division levels. And there probably should be some sort of parameters on there, so no school has an advantage over wanting students to go to a particular school. But I definitely like the idea of some different level of compensation that happens now. Student athletes now, actually, compared to when I played, get paid a little better. I mean, when I played, we got $217 a month, period, and we weren't able to eat at the football training table unless it was football season. So for 2 quarters or 6 months out of the year, we were pretty much on our own on the $217 a month for a per diem. We could stay in the dorms, which as a young person probably was a smarter thing to do, and stay in the dorms and eat the dorm food. But of course, you get older and you think that you want to be a little bit more independent and on your own, and we almost starved to death as a result.
Oh, yeah.
But now student athletes they get a per diem. They are fed during the course of the entire year. They have nutritionists. They have people that can give them direction on what kind of exercise and how to work as it relates specifically to their position. But it is still very, very, very difficult work, and the game is evolving ever so quickly. It's faster. People are stronger. And things happen a lot faster and harder as far as the hits are concerned. And so you got to be physically and mentally prepared, and you also have to be able to really kind of take care of yourself if something bad should happen on the field, whether it's a concussion or you get a torn knee or something, or arm, hand, whatever it is. Having at least some way of getting some dollars in the door as you're doing that, I think, is extremely important. It is a different level when you go from high school to college, and it's a different level when you go from college to the pros. But I think once you leave high school and you get to the college level where you're competing with some of the best athletes in the entire United States, that's where I think it's okay to start opening the door around compensation for student athletes.
Well, it's interesting to hear your position, Eric, on that issue, and I think there's going to be a lot more ahead. Things have been going on in California and around the country on the whole kind of college pay type issue or fair college compensation issue for athletes. Eric, we got less than 7 minutes left, I think. Things have gone pretty quickly. And I want to get into your what you're doing with the NHL Seattle now. But real quickly, Eric, there is a fascinating story that was written up in the Seattle Times about you when you were an African-American kid growing up in Los Angeles. You became a hockey fan, and there was a hockey player named Alton White that you got reconnected with. Can you take a minute or two and share this little of your hockey background to people and this interesting experience with Mr. White that you've had?
Sure. Well, back in 1970, 73, 71, the summer there, it was diagnosed I had a degenerative disease in my hips. And as a result, I had to have hip surgery, and I was bedridden for about a year.
Ouch.
Including a wheelchair and in a bed. And so I had all this time where I was pretty much a shut-in, and I spent a lot of time, of course, watching TV and listening to the radio. And I vowed to listen to every Dodger game, listen to every Ram game, listen to every Laker game, and then there was the LA Kings. And so I started listening and watching the games on TV and actually just fell in love with the sport. It so happened during that later that year, in the following spring, the LA got a WHA team, which was the rival league to the NHL, and they played in the LA Sports Arena back then. And as an 11-year-old boy, I convinced my buddy to go and watch a hockey game. Everybody in the neighborhood thought I was crazy because everybody was on football, and here I'm this African-American kid, punchy kid, trying to go watch hockey, and that says a lot about my mom, who was just incredibly supportive of me. But we went to the LA Sports Arena, and there was hardly anyone there, so we walked down from our cheap seats to the glass, and it just so happened that the players were coming out on the ice at the time, and I knew Alton White was one of the only African-American players to ever play the game in professional hockey. At the time, he was actually the second only African-American player, not African-American, but black player, because he was born in Canada,
Gotcha.
to play hockey. And I started yelling and screaming at him, and he just turned around and gave me a wink, and it just kind of made my day, it made my life, really, to kind of give me a perspective that there's something beyond South Central LA and the ghettos of LA, and a bed that I was bedridden in for that whole year, to actually try to do something more than just exist there. And it meant a lot to me, and I was fortunate enough to be able to be interviewed and have him see the article, and he just lives in Vancouver, BC, and so it was an incredible honor to meet him, have lunch with he and his buddy. We're actually going to see them next month at a hockey game.
Great.
We're going to hang out.
Great.
But he just meant a tremendous amount to me. And he turned out to be exactly the guy that I hope he'd be.
Isn't that great?
Most kid.
Paul Schneiderman on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. If you're just tuning in with Eric Pettigrew, we got like maybe 3 or 4 minutes left. Just a lot of fun chatting with Representative Pettigrew. And, the story you shared really goes to show the impact that sports can have on people long term. Eric, speaking of the NHL in Seattle, can you share with us a little about what your duties are going to be for the NHL franchise? And are you going to be working during the legislative session at all?
I'll be doing some work during legislative session. I've historically had a regular job in addition to being in the legislature, and it usually is balanced out. When I'm in session, I'm doing 90% legislative work and 10% regular work, and it flips when I am not in session. So when I'm in session, I'll be doing 90% legislative work and then about 10% NHL work, which my job there is I'm the Director of Suite Services and Community Ambassador. And what that is basically it's evolving because we're a startup organization. And so right now I'm helping out with the club sales and suite sales. And once the arena gets built, I'll be managing the service staff that will be servicing the suites. But I also will be out in the community giving speeches and talking about the NHL and the importance of being involved in the new franchise and also being able to talk about the benefits of the arena, which is going to include a lot of Live Nation acts. There'll be a lot of musical acts that will come through that haven't come through Seattle for forever or a while because of the venue we've had, and it's going to be a state-of-the-art arena. So my job, besides those two things, is ever evolving. I find myself involved in some community relation stuff, even advising on some political stuff at some level. I'm doing some virtual reality and kind of work. I'm just a connector, and so I'm just helping the NHL connect to our community as well as to some of the leaders in our community on the business side and on the community side.
Well, it's really exciting in the NHL in Seattle in 2021. It's neat that you're part of the franchise. Eric, we may have time for maybe one more question. We're running down, and I actually got like about a minute left. Can you give us any insights on the possibility of the NBA returning to Seattle real quickly?
Well, we're hoping that once we build the arena and the NBA sees the excitement that we have shown with the NHL, as you know, typically NHL franchises take up to 6 weeks or longer to sell out as far as their depositors. We sold out once we announced that we had a franchise in 12 minutes. And so the enthusiasm is definitely here, and we're hoping that that's going to show the NBA that Seattle is a place you should have never left and definitely a place you need to come right back to. And we'll have an arena.
But you don't have any secrets on it you can share with me privately today, though, Eric, do you? On the NBA possibly coming to Seattle?
Absolutely no secrets. I have none. I purposely try to keep myself away from secrets because I'm only like a half a glass wine away from being able to spill them.
That reminds me of me too. Well, Eric, it's just so much fun to have a little chat with you, kind of a condensed chat today. Love to get you back one day, but thank you so much for participating in this interview and on Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio, and you and I will be in touch.
Thank you very much, Paul.
You take care. You too, bye.